click, buy, deliver. With remote purchasing from the two-time Motorcycle News Dealer of the Year, Colchester Kawasaki. Proud sponsors of Chasing the Racing.
3, 2, 1, and welcome back to Chasing the Racing. And we're delighted to be over in Northern Ireland. We're on a little bit of a tour, and we're delighted to be joined by Jeremy McWilliams. How are we doing?
Oh, good. You can't tell from here, but it's freezing outside. We're stuck in my driveway. It's snowing. The heat's on full blast, but I'm glad you made it, boys.
To be fair, I think that bobble hat's given a fair bit for us. That is the world's thickest bobble hat.
It is, mate.
And I tell you what, once a race...
Sponsored.
I was about to say...
No, it's not. I was given free at the last trial, and I haven't had them off my head because it's been freezing here.
I tell you what, the bloke will be watching this now going, that was the best freebie I've ever handed out in my damn life. Jeremy McWilliams is wearing my hat. There we go. But honestly, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
you know, it's welcoming us English strangers onto your driveway, the godforsaken hour of the morning. So
I feel like I've had a bit of an education over the last 24 hours because I've been over to Northern Ireland a couple of times, like flew over, do you know that football match, Glenn, and it was like road races versus
yes. When was that?
A few years ago.
That was quite a few years ago.
I flew over to do that, but literally
they stopped asking me to do it, so I realised I was getting too old for it.
Well, hold on, have they done it since? Let's talk about that for a quick second. That was a brilliant idea, so explain that concept to people who haven't heard of it.
It was a circuit, right? The circuit v the road racers won it, and of course, you know, that's always a hiding to nothing. There's going to be a few injuries picked up on that, so it's always at the end of the year. But they did it, you know. And anything was raised went to charity and stuff. But it's a long time since I've done it. When was the last time you were there?
So it was the beginning of 2019, I think. So it would have been like
really?
So between the 2018
I wasn't even asked.
I definitely wasn't asked. If you weren't
They
asked.
can't tell what side I'm on now, you see, because I'm doing a bit of road racing.
Yeah, Glenn had that problem as well, to be fair. But yeah,
whoever the better player is, you get to pick sides from
and
there.
I came over. Do you know the Belfast bike show?
Yeah.
I came over to that in like something like about 10 years ago. But I've never really spent any time over here. So we got the boat over during the night last night, and it was supposed. All the weather warnings were supposed to be like horrendous crossing and stuff. I did not see any of that. Just straight asleep. Woke up and we're on the Ulster Grand Prix course with Dom taking selfies.
Is that where you were this morning?
I tell you what, I love this. He's waxing lyrical about the picturesque moment of travelling over here. He was fast asleep the entire way through.
You got a nice crossing, well done. Because that can be rough.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, you went up to the Ulster Grand Prix circuit this morning.
Oh God, you know what? It was
-2.
Oh, -3 on the clock there. So it was a case of the podium was empty, and because I'm a sucker for saving a moment, I went straight up, jumped the fence straight up. I'll probably get a fine for this now that they listen to this.
Well, you can always say you stood in the podium there.
That's exactly it. I tell you, I got, you know that Dundrod 150 race and everything. Right. I got on the podium there, so not quite the top step. I was gutted about that one, but I tell you what, we'll end up talking about in depth about your road racing career side of things. But my God, where do we begin with you? Chrissy, please take the helm. I don't even know where to begin. There's such a career here.
I was just thinking about this last night. You know, I started racing obviously before both you were born, but I actually started Grand Prix racing 2 years before he was born. So I'm kind of wondering where your history is going to come from. How are you going to remember any of this?
And that's why we've got you.
And I was just going to say you've got your KTM jacket on there, and I know you've been.
Well, I've got lots of them in the house. I've got tons of them if you want one.
I know it's bloody brassic. I forgot my hoodie here.
You've been for a good number of years now, been really heavily involved in the development side of things, and is that classed as your sort of day job these days?
Yeah, it's kind of a full-time job now. Yeah, it has been for quite a few years. I mean, it used to be where I get a contract from year to year, so it's kind of like racing. You know, kind of waiting for your contract to turn up. You know, come Christmas time, had your contract turned up or not? I've been through that my whole career, which is difficult enough, as you'll both know. And then they said to me, "Look, we need you to kind of commit to this a bit more, and not work for anybody else. In other words, anything that we learn with KTM development, that it can't be shared obviously with anybody else, so you can't jump on and start working for another manufacturer." And that suited me all right, because then they said, "Look, you want a 2 year?" I think they give me a 3 year. They give me a 3 year contract, and I'm still contracted up to the end of this year, 22, and I'm working on stuff that reaches right until 25 and 26 right now. So you kind of hope that it'll renew itself again, but I'm kind of wondering how many years I can keep doing this for. And it's like it's a job obviously, but it's a lovely way to make a living if it's something that you enjoy doing, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and we seem to get good results from it. But we've got quite a number of test riders. We've got about 5 main test riders now. You're on full time.
As a manufacturer as well, especially on the road side of things, I know they've been very been huge and dominant in like sort of motocross, and also in lots of like sort of like obviously the Dakar and all that sort of stuff. But in the last sort of 5 years, especially in the MotoGP side of the thing, if they've really went from being like you would look at the grid and you would kind of expect the KTM's a few years ago to be, more like towards the back of the grid in the GP, and that these days, you turn up at a track and it's much more of a level playing field. But obviously, race wins and at that level as well, competing against the biggest manufacturers, it's a massive jump.
They've made huge steps, haven't they? I mean, it's been great to watch. I'm not part of that MotoGP development side. I've ridden the RC16, which is an awesome day out. To give them,
how blasé was that? Yeah, it was an awesome day.
Actually, Wolfgang Weber, who I work with in customer racing, we developed the RC390 for world level for the Supersport as it was called then, 300 class, which is really a 400 class. And we developed that bike over about a year, and then brought it to give it to a number of teams, and it turned up at first race was Aragon actually, and won. And from that moment, Scott Smart, if you're listening, took the revs down, and of course that put us back a little bit. But it was fun working on that development side of it. And then I got the opportunity through Wolfgang to go, because he's now head of testing for the MotoGP teams, so he's team leader for that. And he said, "Come along, give us a bit of feedback on this." And I rode it at Salzburg Ring. Pretty hairy place to be riding an RC16.
Compared to the GP bikes that you used to ride years ago, was it just like night and day different?
You know what it was funny about it, Chrissy? You go in with kind of like no idea of what to expect. You kind of just turn up and jump on it, and all right. I mean, yeah, you're kind of kicking yourself a little bit because you've got a whole team sitting there watching and waiting and listening, and you jump on it and off you go. The rollout, and you're thinking, "Fuck, don't fall over on the fucking on the outlap."
You know what? I'm so glad you said that, because I was wondering, as a professional rider, does that ever go away? Like, don't fuck up the warm-up.
It never does. It never goes away. And you roll out and you think, don't make any mistakes. Remember what they said, because the gearbox is all different. Remember, it's
seamless, aren't they?
Yeah, it's seamless. So the gears all work all from one way, and you've got to take off. You've got to then lock in that it can't go back into neutral. So as you take off, you've got to select something to get into neutral. Then you put it into first gear, and once you take off that, then you can't get back into neutral again. So it just goes first to sixth and back from sixth back to first, with no gap for neutral as it is on a road bike. So it's that doesn't affect you, because we're so used to flicking from second into first anyway. It just the reason being is that it can never find a false neutral.
Yeah.
And then getting used to the seamless gearbox is quite weird, because it doesn't stop pulling. As you go from first to second, it pulls your arms out. You don't get that slight lag where it changes from first to second. It just keeps pulling. I remember getting on and thinking, this thing's it's all right. The traction control was well wound up. Obviously, they tamed it down. I said, well, what do you tame it down to? They said, well, it's only 250 horsepower.
Oh yeah, that's totally acceptable.
Yeah, it's only 250 horsepower. Yeah, it'd be 250, 255.
I'm warming up. Don't worry about it. I'm warming up.
Well, the funny thing was, Dom, is you first and second gear, it can only deliver so much power. You can only use so much power, and it spins a little bit and it takes off. It doesn't actually start going until you hit fourth gear. And when it gets into fourth gear, it literally wants to pull your arms out of the sockets. It's now making closer to 100% of the power once it gets up to middle of third gear and into fourth gear. And yeah, it's definitely quite a physical thing to ride.
You know how what was that program, the Unridables? You know, the GP days back when like moustaches mattered. You know what I mean? Like big, thick moustaches, smoke rollies, and that was proper racing. And it was all just full whiskey, wasn't it? It was all just power through the race.
Just get mine ready.
I know. It's literally thickening it out. The more we talk about it,
that's taking a while. That's from the 1st of November.
Good man. But like, do you reckon that would never ever happen again? Would it? I was thinking about this the other day. It's like that was proper wire stretching to the back wheel, straight. Pure aggression. You're talking about 250 brake horsepower limited. What can that bike be capable of at full whack?
I don't think that any of them ever admit it. You know, I work for KTM. I don't think I even know the true number, but it must be 280-ish.
280-ish. Now, do you reckon they would never ever, like BSB, they've gone like more tech and obviously just no traction, no nothing. Imagine if they introduce that now in the MotoGP. Yeah. Would it be the Unridables again?
Well, it would be, wouldn't it? I mean, you know,
gotta be, hasn't it?
Well, I just remember it's above 280. I'm lying. It's actually quite a bit above 280. But
Jesus,
when we were riding, I mean, 2004 when I rode the Cube, which was an absolute horrible bike to ride. It was an Aprilia Cube, 3-cylinder, and it made about 240 horsepower back then. You were about 10.
Do you know, with your development work, is it always on the tarmac stuff? You don't do any of the...
No, I do. I get to ride some off-road stuff. We're working on... it just depends on the scheduling, how it works with the test rider. Sometimes I've got to fill in for a test rider. One of the guys that was in charge of the latest 390, the enduro. Well, there's a number of them, but you know, call it the Adventure, 390 Adventure. And he had broke his leg testing. You know, the first day of testing, they called me in and just said, "Can you get some suspension set startup?" Because it was a P0. So a P0 is something that is a prototype. The very, very first, there is only one, and that then moves on to P1 and P2 and P3. By P3, that's just pre-production. So you turn up and you've something you've never seen before. We don't even know what it is until we turn up. And then you turn up and go, "Okay, you're working on that today. Give us some suspension settings for that just to get us in the ballpark." And you got to, that's an off-road setup because they want this one to be more off-road oriented rather than on-road. And so I did that for a number of weeks until he got better, and then he comes back and gets back.
It's a massive sort of market that the adventure things and like people going on holidays, and especially for KTM as well. And obviously it's quite recent in the news with Dakar on at the moment. And
isn't Petrucci doing well?
I was going to say, what do you think of Petrucci? I mean, to transfer. I mean, I don't know how much experience he's got in that sort of terrain previously to this year, but to transfer across from MotoGP to that and to win a stage.
He's got any, because I'd heard he'd done a test in Dubai, broke his ankle and ruptured the other one. A number of weeks before he came to do the Dakar, so he's riding with virtually very badly injured, and he's still doing what he's doing. So
if you're going to put a bet on that before this, like the odds of that happening, it's so incredible. The like it's so unlikely to have happened.
We should have all just gone down, shouldn't we? Put a tenner on him winning a stage, because no MotoGP riders ever won a stage of the Dakar. That's the first ever.
Period. Yeah.
Period. That's the first ever it's happened. But I think more remarkable than that is that he was in the running from day one, and he'd never rallied before, or he'd never properly rallied before. That's like turning up to TT, isn't it, and winning a race, and never seen it before, which is nigh on impossible, as you know, Don. But he's just the talk of the town. My whole Twitter feed is just Petrucci.
But like there's so many little rules in Dakar racing, speed penalties. He was actually second. And then, who was the rider? Number one?
Toby. It was Toby got a time penalty.
Was he a KTM rider as well?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, he's the old guard. He's the one that knows how to do it. I'm just wondering how many risks Petrucci's taken to be where he's been. But first day he was top 5. Day 2, whenever they got him going again, he finished in top. He finished 3rd. So it wasn't like a one-off.
Because from the outside looking in, it's one of them races that looks like, quite frankly, easy. You know what I mean? I think there's a map. Off you go across the desert. It is far from that as you could ever imagine. Everything that they're hitting is fully committed. They do not know what's on the other side of those sand dunes. They have no idea what the temperature. It's unreal.
The risk is high. If you watch any of some of the snippets where and the camera's usually set up somewhere where it's pretty bloody dangerous. Yeah. Some of the stuff you've seen Toby over on those roads, absolutely wide open, 100 and something, 120 mile an hour in some places, whatever it is, and he's completely wide open over, jumping for.
It's incredibly dangerous. Like if you look at the fatality rates of Dakar,
what are they?
It's high. Like I've had friends, known friends, and that have done it, and come across guys who've died on the Dakar just sitting beside their bike. It's a treacherous race, and one that I would never ever want to take part in. Really? What blew me away was that he wanted to do it, coming out of MotoGP and actually wanting to do the Dakar. So it takes a special kind to do it, and I don't think it gets half of we don't really know how dangerous and how difficult it is, because it's so removed. We don't watch it. It's once a year and we don't watch it much.
That's what I mean. It's like from the outside, when you look at the clip, it just looks like a fun day in the sandbox, doesn't it? You know what I mean?
I don't know for sure.
450 kilometers, I think, was the one that he won.
Wow.
And one day, 450 kilometers.
Right, you're a maths teacher. What's that in miles?
450.
Here we go.
300 miles, isn't it?
Yeah. Jesus, in it.
Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
That's nearly as much as chasing the race, and that's nearly as much.
You hadn't even driven that far to come here.
I suppose it's actually more the boat journey, but that is absolutely that. I still can't get my head wrapped around how good that is. But you've never fancied having a go. You of everything that you've done.
It's like the TT. I keep getting asked why do you not do the TT? Yeah. But it's having to go and spend the time learning it. And you think the same with Petrucci having to learn how to rally. How he would have to go away and get himself prepared for that. He obviously didn't do much preparation. I mean, the season's only finished. He went to Dubai, broke his ankle, then went to the Dakar, and is now he's top three. They're given a time penalty, obviously, because his bike had to be rescued. He had an electrical fault, something with a fuel pump problem, and the bike had to be rescued. So they give him a penalty of 10 minutes. So he's never going to finish in the top three, but it doesn't really matter. Saying what I was talking about was, going to TT. I'm watching Glenn going back and forward and having to learn the roads. Going right, drive the roads and trying to learn that vast, number of turns must be pretty difficult. You've done it, and you're never, you don't think you're going to turn up and be competitive because it's so difficult to learn, in 1 year. It's going to take a number of years, and that's kind of why I went to the Northwest 200, because it's only 29 miles long. You can learn it in a day.
Mm-hmm. But then all that you've done, you've done Armoy as well.
Yeah,
and then have you done the Ulster?
But Armoy is like
a back garden.
It's a short circuit race, isn't it, with jumps?
Yeah,
like huge jumps. But it is. You can get around it in the same sort of time as you can get around a big short circuit, and you can learn that pretty quickly too. But it does have its dangers, and it's quite unique, where you're jumping when the bike's leant over, you got two wheels off the floor, and then you've got sixth gear jumps, down that back over the laggy, the jumps, and that scared the life out of me the first time I did it.
Did you know, like all the way through your career, did you know that you were planning on doing like the Northwestern bit, or did it just happen like after you'd finished the GP stuff and like the opportunities?
No. You said to me, there's with the podcast and people who watch it are road race fans and circuit fans, and a lot of the people listening will go, yeah, well, he hated road racing. And the only reason why I spoke about road racing, I was racing GPs, and I thought I'd never go back to road racing, because you kind of think your career's never going to finish, and you think you're going to keep doing this for ages. And I was getting into my 40s. I think I was 40 when I was still MotoGP racing, and then I thought what happened was I lost a couple of really good mates. Simon Beck and Ian King was one of the first mates I lost, and Mark Farmer, all the guys that I'd met through my career and become quite close with, and then you start losing them. Of course, it really does. It hits a nerve, and it's hard to take. And I thought, I'm never going to do that. And why are they doing this, and why are they doing it? It wasn't until I finished racing professionally I thought, well, I wouldn't mind giving it a go just to see what it's like. Northwest 200. surely we can just go up and have a good week up there. There's no pressure, there's no pressure. And this is how naive you are. You turn up thinking, this is not going to be, no pressure here. I'll just turn up and have a bit of a crack, and go out and play golf on Wednesday, and take my mates out, and on Thursday night we'll go down to the Anchor and get a few beers, and because we've got Friday off. And I'm kind of thinking about all the gaps you've got through the week. I'm thinking this will be good fun. And then, of course, reality hits home. You go out, you do the novice lap, with your big novice bib on you, and you're out and you're trying to learn it, and then then it sinks in. You're thinking, shit, I gotta learn this, and I can't just turn up here and be an also ran. It was a bit of pressure. Yeah.
And talk like that first year. Now, were you riding for KMR, Ryan Farquhar's team that year?
Yeah.
Now, were you on the full fleet or just Super Twin at that point?
Just at that point, it was just Super Twin. I only turned up because Ryan had come to Phillip Island. We were doing the Phillip Island Classic International.
I'd love to do that one day.
And it is awesome. Like it's probably the best meeting you'll ever go to.
Really?
Honestly, it's awesome. And of course, it's a team, so we're all trying to think about how we all finished to get ourselves more points and try to win the team thing overall. And I'm trying to win it overall. And I was listening to Hickey on the podcast, and Hickey was absolutely determined to win it overall, as an individual, and of course, I wasn't going to let him do that. And it turns in, so the team thing becomes very competitive, and the teams become very competitive against each other. But it's a really, really good race. And I still, to the life of me, I can't understand why it was never televised, because it was brilliant. It was super racing.
Huge names going over there. Yeah, absolutely huge. Like you had the Ireland team, like the United Kingdom team. You had the Americans. You had
Colin Edwards turned up at
Jesus,
it.
That's what.
Yes, it was, and everybody took it really seriously. Yeah, it's. Of course, where else would you want to go in January? You were sitting in my driveway and it's snowing outside. Do you want to go to Phillip Island for 3 weeks?
Oh, twist me off. Yeah.
Let's have a think about that. So that's how we ended up going. I did that for about 9 years or so, and really loved it. And then back to what we're talking about, Ryan said to me, "Yeah, all right, I can't beat you around here, but what about you come to the Northwest and see if you can stick with me around the Northwest?" And that's really over a glass of wine. That's how it happened.
Oh, glass of wine then. Yeah, I was wondering where the leverage came in.
Might have been a bottle. Anyway, we said, yes, I said, I'll of course I'll do it if I'm riding one of your bikes, knowing, if you're going to be on one of Ryan's bikes, they're going to be the best, aren't they? And they still are to this day. And I went down, and fair play to him, bikes were equal, and away we went. And, it was lovely. I think we had a 1, 2, 3 at the first year. He finished first, I think. I was second. Maybe Rudder was third. It might have been the year after. But I remember getting a second the first time I tried it, and I think then the bug hit. You're thinking, this is a bit of crack. This is good fun. Yes, as you know, Dom, that lead up to a road race, you're absolutely kicking yourself. The nerves are. You're on your wit's end, and once the flag drops, it's kind of, you go into like another world. Yeah.
It is unreal. But talk me through your first lap. Did you have any doubts of doing this, or was it literally you just went off down, you came in the railway and went, oh yeah,
I think
this is me.
I remember thinking that you don't think anything, because you're completely open. You don't know what way it's going to go, and you don't know where you're going to be 8th or 1st or 18th. You have no idea. You've no perception of what you're capable of.
Were you willing, if you went after your first lap, in your mind, were you willing to step off the bike and go, you know what, I don't want to do it? Did you have that attitude going into it, or being a man of your competitive nature was like, I'm doing this, period?
I was doing it all the way through. I was doing it, and I was sticking with it. And I remember first lap, running at the front and thinking, it's not so bad.
You were in with a shout.
I'm riding beyond my level here, so stick with it and see how it goes, and you do. And then every year I turn up, I don't qualify that well, because I realised that absolutely putting everything on the line for qualification at the Northwest 200 means nothing. It's not like circuit racing whatsoever. I can start from 6th and lead it across the line. 2019, I was about 6th off the start, and I think I led it across the line. So it's nearly a help to start a little bit back, because you're going to get a bit of a drag along, through station, as you say, and all the way to university. Come to university, as long as you're brave on the brakes, you can hold your own. Sometimes you can hold that all the way to Maher's chicane. And, those chicanes can be a bit Mickey Mouse. I love them to open Maher's a bit. It's a bit, I've fallen off just by running across the grass on it.
I remember that, yeah.
So I've made a few mistakes at it too, but I tend to only use that, you know what I mean, Chrissy, when you're riding above the 10 tenths, you know, as we do on the circuit a lot, I only do that in places where I know I can get away with.
Yeah. I mean, the twin race, especially at the Northwest, so good. I mean, that race with James, when James Counton did the pass right there. That's one of my favourite races.
I'm sorry, we all had one angle. He had the angle. You know what I mean? That was just, like...
Was that whenever that pattern came across about this height? I think it was... Yeah, Counton went underneath.
Joey Thompson.
Yeah, Joey, yeah. And he kind of lifted him, and Joey hit the curb, and I was in behind. I remember the bike either passing over my head or passing about here, and I'm only thinking, they're second at least. You know, you're not even. You know, why are you thinking like that? You know, I'm not thinking about Joey falling. You're in that zone. And you're thinking, right, can I get Counton before the line?
That was by far, like, I'm like, James was a really, really good friend of mine. I'm very biased, but that one move is it was just drifted in totally sideways, but it looked like an acre of room. He didn't contact with Thompson whatsoever, and it was just.
It was awesome.
I bet that
it was brilliant.
I bet you were watching it going.
Well, I was thinking, there's no way the two aren't going into one here, because it is only a one line through that exit on Juniper Chicane. There is, you know, I'm thinking it's that. I'm skimming the curves every single time. It's like curb to curb, and you're thinking, well, two bikes don't go through there. But couldn't make it work.
Do you know when you came back from Phillip Island and you sat down with the family and said, I've sat down with Ryan over a glass of wine and I've decided I'm going to road race next year. And was the family like very supportive of that, or were they sort of had the reservations? Or
have you ever heard a long silence? It was like everything just went quiet from you're what?
Well, we've just met your wife, Jill. She's the next guest, so we're gonna get her angle on it. So my God,
it was difficult. Just breaking out at the beginning, but then, you know, of course, I had to lie and say, like, I'm only going up to ride around and have a bit of fun.
Every bloke said that, haven't they?
Yeah, and then you know,
when you took the lead on lap one.
If you watch their faces, you know, during the whole lead up to it, and I've watched the cameras have been on them during the race, and I've seen that afterwards. Yeah, you can see that they're going through every emotion. And but the funny thing is, you know,
what an absolute.
Well, the funny thing is, you know, once that race is over, you know, the elation of standing on the podium there and having the family around you, there's nothing like it. You know, you can't. I've likened it to winning a GP. You know, it's probably better because you're at home in front of a home crowd, and all your mates are there, everybody's there, all the people that couldn't be there at a GP. You know, you win a GP or you finish on a podium in a GP or a MotoGP, and really it's wherever you are, you might have a small number of your family with you, but you don't have all your friends around you. You don't have the whole country waving you on. You know, whenever I remember watching Joey for years, you know, where the programs were waving and, you know, waving him on because Joey was the big name here. Obviously, he was our hero, the legend of road racing, and still is. But the way that reaction that he used to get riding around the coast road, you know, and then the odd time you'd see little flurries, you know, because the racing was so close and so tight, and you know, you see the programs going and everybody getting elated. There's nothing like riding around the North Coast, Chrissy. It's something that you should do.
I can imagine.
Now, I was going to ask, would you recommend it to Chrissy? Because
well, look how many people have come over from BSB and done so well at it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an easy place to learn. I think as far as road racing goes, it's relatively safe. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of wide open spaces on and runoffs and stuff and braking areas. And you know, there's the only technical section is across the coast road, and the only difficulty on the coast road is Black Hill. And once you learn the line into Black Hill, which is a blind crest, you've got it. You know, if you you don't make a mistake, you don't turn in before the fourth from the top white line. It's just you lock it in, and that's once you've learned it, you know, you'll ride around it safely all day long. But it's such a fun place to ride, and it's the best time of the year, just coming into the spring, summer, and the place is just buzzing, isn't it?
It's Northern Ireland's biggest outdoor event, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so special, because there's so many people who come to it, and yeah, we make the most of it. You know, don't get me wrong. You know, we we book our restaurants. We get, we all get out together. We get family and friends together. We play golf on the Wednesday at Royal Portrush. I mean, how many get to do that once a year?
So, I tell you what, going back to like suggesting it, so I hope Karen, Chrissy's mum's not watching it going, don't you dare tell my boy to go road racing. But you know what's interesting is when you speak to a lot of like, fast, like sharp end, short circuit lads, and it's almost like the beginning of an addiction. And what's interesting about yourself is you did Northwest and Armoy. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did Tandragee as well.
Hold it, you're a proper roads racer than you.
Well, honestly, Tandragee is like another level again.
Is
this all difficult? It's beautiful, but it's really difficult to learn.
Is this all with Ryan on Ryan's Super Twin bikes?
Yeah. And I also wrote a patent. The older patent that he races at the TT. Another one of Roger Winfield's bikes.
Oh God, that's a rocket ship.
Yeah, that's a good bike there. So, and I thought I'll be all right in this. I had no chance. I was never going to win that race. Really? At the first effort around Tandragee, because it's like to me it's like a little mini TT. It's quite difficult to learn. It doesn't matter how many times you've been around it. It's really technical. Chrissy, a lot of blind crests. Through the bomb holes when you come out of the bomb hole. I was really like eyes wide open, trying to work my way out around it and trying to stay safe at the same time. But it's an awesome road race. But it would take me a couple of years to get that right.
But what's interesting that you've immediately put a cap on it, and I think that's what a lot of short, like I'm only speaking this from my opinion. You know what I mean? Lads haven't said this to me, but it almost seems like they don't want to do the Northwest because they think that'll lead into other things, and they almost don't want to do that. And it's interesting that you kind of put a cap on it.
Yeah, I wanted to do it just to go down and look at. I'd heard so much about that those road races and Armoy. Armoy is like it's another thing again. It's like because it's so a special part of Northern Ireland. Where all the Dunlops were brought up and where they tested and what have you, and that's kind of how the Armoy came about. A friend of mine was sponsoring it, and I went up just one day up to the hospitality and sat and watched it and had a few beers with them and just loved the atmosphere. The atmosphere is just like something else. It's different again than the Northwest, and it's a totally different type of riding. I mean, you cannot compare road racing of the Northwest nature to Armoy. No. It's like completely opposite way of your whole approach is quite different.
You've gone from like most tracks have positive camber. It's like when you come over the back jumps, it's all negative camber. You're going downhill and the road's sweeping away from you, and like the front end feel comes very immediate because the road's just sweeping away. But it is proper.
Style and everything changes, and class. which is good because it makes us think. So it's not an easy. And I love challenging circuits. I love to try to ride a challenging circuit, and that is. To learn it and go fast at it, Dom, is quite tricky. And I remember I had a great race with Jimmy Hamilton, good friend of ours, riding trials as well. We were just talking about that earlier on, and he said to me, he was on one of Ryan's bikes also that year, and I thought I had them all lined up over the jumps, and you get into that last corner, the off camber one you're talking about before it gets onto the start finish. And of course, I just messed up a little bit, went a little bit wide, clipped the curb protectors, just got it sideways and lost all the drive. And we came across the line, like this. And I thought, wouldn't it have been nice to win the first attempt at the Armoy when I was happy enough with second place, and we held a lap record for a year or two. And it was an awesome race to ride in, and I just love the atmosphere, love the organisers and everything about it.
Do you know, in terms of like risk reward, have you always decided to stick to the twins as opposed to like going on the 600s and the big bikes? Is it more of a risk, like just to limit the risk?
Yeah, it's not any easier. As Rudder said to me in 19, he said, you guys are riding that like a short circuit. He says, I'm not prepared to do that. So I'm not prepared to ride at that level anymore. He says, I'm happy to take a third on these, but I'm not riding the way you guys are having to ride those now. And it has gone
which tracks
at Northwest.
At the Northwest,
yeah. And over the years, it has become, because there's so many good bikes now. When Ryan started at the beginning, his bikes were the best, but every twin is as good as that now, and the patterns are really hard to beat. So I over the years that class has become way more competitive. But I did get the opportunity. Was it 17? 16 or 17 to ride all the Martrain bikes, and I rode all them. So I rode the stock bike and the Surf bike.
You did,
600 and the twin. And then you've got to drop one. You can't run all those classes on a day.
It's a shame that.
Yeah.
I can see why they do, but in the same breath, one race. Come on.
It was hard work, wasn't it?
You're an athlete, man. Get over yourself.
Did you enjoy
It was hard work.
Did you enjoy the big bikes on?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I had a real good battle with Robert Dunlop and stuff on the stock bike, and you know, I didn't really expect much. You know, I think I got top 10 or something. You know, a couple of top 10s in it, and I was happy enough with that because she just started the car.
Even that's getting pinched.
And they, you know, I probably took on too much, you know, having a go at all of those, and then what happens is times change. You know, you go back and you lie down, you want to put your head down, and
Bluetooth mode.
I think we got electric out. I think.
Click, buy, deliver with remote purchasing from the 2-time Motorcycle News Dealer of the Year, Colchester Kawasaki. Proud sponsors of Chasing the Racing.
There we go. So where do we get to there, lads?
Well, just you're talking about riding everything at the Northwest. I remember it's quite funny now. You know, it wasn't funny at the time, but I missed the 600 race because I was still laying up in the camper sleeping because we knew what time it was, and we kind of we expect, you know, the schedule to run as per when it says in the, you know, in the program, and of course it doesn't because it changes. You know, because
Rapidly, aye.
Weather's changing, or one race has been brought in for the other, or they just bring the race forward, and they brought the race forward, and of course I turned up in the 600 grid and everybody had gone. And that was the one race I really wanted to get into, to see, you know, how the draft worked with the 600. Was it as good as the twin? And you know, I remember putting everything on the line actually during qualifying to try to see what I was capable of on the 600, and I wasn't even close to top 3.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how the Aprilia does this year. The new 660.
Yeah,
so that's kind of like the new addition to the twin class, and it's much more of a, in terms of like all of the stock bikes, it's definitely a step up. But whether that'll transfer to the racing bikes, it's difficult to see. But there's a few good pilots. Lee Johnson's on one, and a few good pilots.
He's got a couple of them now. But you see, what's interesting is they're allowing 700s in now.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Has that been passed yet? Right?
I have no idea.
Because it has for the TT. But I mean, it can't work. You know, really, it would have to work for the Northwest 200 and everything else as well.
Is it not a 650 limit at the TT?
Well,
but then the 660 Aprilia, they haven't actually released any regulations on any of the events. Now, the good news while we're sitting here is they've released the TT entry system, but I've not seen. Aldo, I'm going to check that the regs aren't out, are they?
Not that I've seen. FIM ones are out.
Yeah, the FIM for the World Series is out, but for the TT and the road side of things, but there's a lot of ifs and buts and ands.
Yeah, well, Ryan was saying just before Christmas, we met up, and he's saying that, you know, obviously if the TT's allowing 700s, it's going to have to be same at the Northwest, because the Northwest is kind of the preparation race for the TT. So I'm looking forward to see how they're going to work that one out, because we would have to, you know, he would have to produce a 700, and I think he's up for that. You know, whether I ride for him or not, you know, it's nothing's decided yet. You know, I've ridden a pattern at Bishop's Court and had some at the Kyrgyzstan, a bit of fun on it, and yeah, I haven't, and I never decide whether I'm going to do the Northwest anyway until kind of like a month before.
When you get the itch, you mean? You're like that. Well, you know, I fancy it, but that's go on.
I think if you sat and thought about that, your whole year, you know, you'd be wound up to high dough, because you know you're nearly better to take it as it comes. If the things are right, if everything's right, you get the right opportunity on the right bike, then, you know, why not do the Northwest 200 again? But I don't have any plans at the minute until we see what's going to happen.
In terms of like your career, have you set in your head, do you know when you're going to hang the leathers up racing for good, or do you think you'll just, when you're not enjoying it, or
just fade away? I don't know. You know, it's that weird thing, you know, never say never, you know, when are you going to retire? And, you know, I kind of have retired, except that every now and then you get an opportunity to come back. So coming back, and it's quite difficult, you know, hopping in and out and trying to be competitive isn't as easy as it would have been whenever you're riding a lot. That one of the best races we had was you were there at Bishop's Court, at the Sunflower.
I wasn't there for long.
We
were briefly talking about this beforehand.
yeah. End up with a finger like mine.
And I was about to say, I'm like, we're sitting in the garage talking about trials bike, what's going on in the world, and I noticed that you're missing a finger, and it was just like a kindred spirit across the room. Like, so how? Because obviously, when you see that similar injury, you want to know how it fixes with your bikes. And so, and you asking me how did you lose it, and I said, funny enough, I lost it massively at the Bishop's Court Sunflower, and then got out of hospital in time to watch you and on Farquhar's bike and Glinch smashing.
What a great race, that brilliant race with you, and I think that's what kind of spurs you on. You know, a great race with Glenn Irwin, and you.
Glenn was on Cookstown, John Burroughs' bike. Is that right?
Yeah. Was that year or the year before?
Because, I can't mind on.
Because Glenn was there the year before I had that battle with Ewan. And I mean, Ewan was in that battle too, with a good three-way battle. And, as Glenn said at the end, he said, that's as hard as I've ever had to ride. And, me too, and Ewan, I'm sure, as well. But when you at the end of a race like that, that's what makes it even more enjoyable, because, you've got off and you've put absolutely everything into it.
Put it this way, right? This man is never going to retire. He can sit there and flutter his eyelashes. He'll never retire. I saw you cross the line, hitting the tank like that. Bollocks!
Shit. Yeah,
I could hear the swear words, and I'm going, "That is not a happy buddy riding down there." It was absolutely outstanding watching. I was good not to be in it, but it was like great to watch.
It was good. I bet those are good fun races. That's what makes racing. That's why we keep going back.
I bet it's fantastic racing. Like at the age you are, battling with the
what are you trying to say,
kids.
What are you trying to say?
Kids.
Well, not to be his dad, obviously.
Yeah, and it must,
I was on a cube when you were 10.
Yeah, like take you back years and like, I mean, all I can say is when I'm your age, I really hope I'm doing the same.
I remember whenever Ian Newton asked me to come and ride at the
Thruxton, I remember
the Super Stock. So I did the whole year, I think, in the stock. That was an eye opener too on the Aprilia. We were trying to get just more to try to get the Aprilia working. It was out of the ballpark at that stage, and we were going back to Aprilia and saying, hey, there's a wrong link in it, and this and that and the other. And they said, yeah, we know that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is the link we use in stock in World Championship, but you're not allowed it in BSB, so you can't have it. I go, that was just the rules at the time. You couldn't change. Then a year or two afterwards, they got it changed, and now the Aprilia is pretty competitive. But I remember, having to commit to that too again for the whole year, Chrissy. And what gets me now is that you've got to start going back to the gym, and that whole part of my life, you kind of I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to jump on get out on a motorbike every Saturday and Sunday, get the gym 3 times a week, go to circuit classes, because that's the only way you're going to come back and ride at any age, never mind how old I was when I came back to ride Superstock. And the same thing now occurs now if you start to think about the Northwest 200 and what have you, you're going to have to start doing something just in case it does come up. Without even planning it, you're going to have to start being, taking a bit more care, get into the gym and all that. And that's part of my life I don't miss.
You must... keep your finger on the pulse in terms of your fitness. Like you visually, you look like you like keep training, and like you're very like chiseled, and you haven't got much.
Now you're kissing his arse. Hold on.
You haven't got much.
How old are you?
You haven't got much fat on you. You look like you must do. Do you not cycle or like?
Yeah, I'd cycle with Glenn, and meet up with Johnny, and the odd time, and of course that always turns into a complete nightmare. You're out for let's go for a cycle. Simon, we had a great little cycle group. We had Simon Reid and Alistair Seeley, Glenn Irwin and Andrew Irwin, and then we meet up with Johnny the odd time. And of course, you came back.
You've got the most competitive people on the planet.
You're looking at your averages and you're going, oh my God, my heart rate was higher than it was when I was racing MotoGP. And the average over the 45 minutes or 48 minutes of MotoGP, my heart rate was averaging 170 odd. And now it's 177 riding with these guys on the road. So I kind of realized that if I keep doing this, I'm not going to be around for much longer.
I tell you what, you've got an amazing hub in such a small, concentrated area. I mean, if you took like for example, where me and Dom live, if you did if you got like a 50-mile radius around us, there's not many people that are into bike racing or just in the sport in general. Yeah. But over here, for such a small, compact country, I mean, there's so much talent, and like from all across all of the classes, all of the different disciplines. It's a proper motorbike place.
I think the Northern Irish are particularly, you know, the tennis, they're when they take something up, they really, they go with it. It's all in or nothing, you know, and you notice that when you're hanging around with like-minded people, you know, the Irwins and Alistair Seeley and, you know, and Johnny and those guys, they're absolutely committed to whatever they're going to do. So it doesn't matter whether it's cycling or motocrossing. Going to watch JR on a motocrosser, you know, it's frightening. And the Irwin brothers battling up around their backyard. So during lockdown, you know, we used to cycle up and watch them training in the motocross track behind, you know, the Irwin family home. And it turned into, you know, they're knocking 10 bells out of each other.
Mint.
Absolutely.
Mint.
Knocking 10 bells out of each other. And then get on the road, of course, and then the cycling starts and they do exactly the same. You know, and it turned into a competition of how many King of the Mountains they could take between them. And you're stuck in the middle of it, you know, trying to stick with them. But I remember we had some great times during lockdown. We shouldn't even be cycling together, you know, but there was the only way we could keep seeing and keep preparing for what was coming up. I knew I was probably gonna ride the Northwest that year, and then of course the Northwest was cancelled anyway.
Do you know, in terms of your development job with KTM, obviously I presume for a massive chunk of the time there was no sort of travelling to Spain, everything was closed down. Was it a case of developing the bike on the Xbox and feeling, I think we need a bit more preload?
I travelled the whole way through it.
Oh really?
Yeah.
And just carried on.
So whenever they said you couldn't travel, we had to get dispensation to travel. And I mean, it was pretty frustrating. I have to tell you, you know, turning up to Dublin Airport and the girl at check-in going, "Where are you going?" I said, "Yeah, well, you've sold me a flight. I'm obviously going to Barcelona, or I'm going to Munich, you know, to meet up with work, you know, in Austria. I'm going to Austria or wherever it was." And they would ask you why you're traveling, and you'd have to get a letter from the company and show them the letter from the company to prove why you're traveling, that it was for a legitimate reason. You know, have you had your test, your PCR test before vaccinations? Yeah, there's my test, and every time I got on, it was quite a nightmare for a while. And during lockdown, we were in Spain, working in Spain, and there was a 10 p.m. curfew where we were staying. So we sometimes wouldn't get back from work until maybe sort of 8 o'clock at night. You know, by the time you get back and try to find food and all the rest of it, that became a problem too. And, you know, and then our teams that we were working together would like to eat together, so we'd have they'd rent a house and we'd be in the house together. And then some of them would have to go back to the hotel because the house couldn't hold everybody. And the police stopped them on the way. And where do you think you're going? Well, I'm just going back to the hotel. Oh, you're not allowed to be out, and trying to find the guy. So we had to get letters from KTM Spain to say that we had dispensation to be out after 10 p.m. because of work commitments. So it was quite difficult, but we worked on regardless, and we got through all of the stuff.
Get pretty lucky in that respect.
Yeah,
being able to continue as normal, and like it's nice.
But it just wasn't much fun. Yeah. But you know, and the only fun thing I loved about it was that you get on a flight and there's maybe 3 people on it.
Yeah. You get the legs up.
You go, I wonder where I'll sit today. You don't have to sit where you're meant to.
Do you know the Red Bull Ring in Austria?
Yeah.
Is that KTM own that?
It's owned. No, it's actually owned by Red Bull. And of course, with the partnership between, you know, Red Bull and KTM, they get a lot of use out of it. Let's just say, I mean, it's awesome to go and watch a Grand Prix, a MotoGP there. You know, I was there when Brad Binder won.
That I'm so glad you talked, because we were talking about that briefly. That was outstanding.
That was special. The photographs we've got in that KTM stand, because we did a lovely thing called Ultimate Duke Rider, and they invited me along. So there's a marketing department, and there's a R&D department. So I work between both. I'm contracted to R&D, but I can work for marketing if they ask me to come along. And they said, "Would you want to come along for a week?" And we're going to ride from Mattycoven. We're going to do a tour of their brand new KTM Hall of the House of Fame, or whatever it's called, the museum that they have there now, and ride from there to we'll end up in Red Bull Ring.
Aye.
But we're going to go via a circuit in Hungary. So we're going to go to Hungary, and then we're going to go from there. We'll do a day there, and then we're going to go from there to Red Bull Ring. How long is this going to take? And I said, well, we'll just do it over a week. Okay.
What a great way to pay the mortgage.
It definitely was. And I mean, those little opportunities that you get to do, with KTM are very, very special. But arriving at the Red Bull Ring and going into the stand and the atmosphere, because we'd all been locked down for so long. This is the first major event. And I think because the year before there was nobody at it. So this year it was absolutely chock-a-block. And to see Brad, winning in the conditions or whatever it might have been, but the place erupted, and just to be part of that was pretty special.
That was for me. That was the best GP moment I've ever witnessed. It was just, God, I could replay that in my mind again and again and again. I tell you what, speaking briefly on KTM now, we talked about your super twin. Have you not decided to write a couple of letters going? Can we? Have you not thought about building me a fancy video?
I just got caught, didn't I? Snapped by, we get these the paparazzi around the area that we tested in Spain. I was snapped on a little super sport bike, and of course that's all been questioned now. Is that going to happen, or is it not? Can that be part of it or not? But again, I just ride what they give me to ride and try to give them a direction on it. I don't know whether they'll produce the bike or whether they don't produce the bike. That's above my pay grade.
He's covering this really well. He's covering this really well. But the Kramer project. KTM, that is a beautiful bike. It was only like 500 made of those or something.
They did that as a one-off, with Marcus Kramer. And I got to ride that when it was a 790 in it. Now they have the 890cc motor in it.
Eddie Roberts got something to do with that in the UK.
Yeah, I think he's the importer for it. Yeah,
I think so. Barry Burrell's been racing one in the GP2 class in British Super Sport.
Right.
I think it's quite. In terms of power, horsepower, I think it's quite low, but I think it's like a real good chassis and like very rideable. So I don't know if, like you said about Scott Smart, I don't know if they can.
I think they are trying to balance it some way to bring it into super sport, and that'll take a bit of balancing to do that. But I'd love to see it there. And again, if KTM produce the next variation of this, which would be a road going bike and not a circuit going bike, if they ever do that. That would also be awesome to get it into the super sport class. But again, with you're talking about the twins thing, Dom, I think that's always going to be limited to a lower CC, which kind of falls out of anything that KTM produce, because the smallest twin
they have the free
790.
The parallel.
Yes, the parallel twins, the smaller one 790, and the current Duke at the minute is 890.
Because they have such a range of bikes, you think they would almost let's build another one, and such a competitive range.
Like a 690 now. Yeah.
That's what I mean. I'm just thinking, I'm surprised KTM haven't done it, especially with your victories and your experience.
It's just not. It doesn't really rank high up on their things to do.
I suppose.
They are ready to race. Everything they speak about is ready to race, but they kind of the categories that they're racing in are that they're either full on into or really they're not interested in it. And I work on all of their street stuff. People kind of think, well, why aren't you working on their race stuff? But there's not an awful lot other than the 390 that we spoke about, the RC 390. Still working on that. And one of the lead designer for the project leader was Sean Anderson from here.
Aye.
He's now moving on. Unfortunately, he's off to pastures new. But he was good for that. And as I say, I think they're going to put another effort into pushing more towards that for racing. And certainly in Super Sport 400 or whatever it becomes in the future.
Now, we've kind of done this interview sort of back to forward, like from what we usually do. We usually start with like, well, how did you get into racing, and kind of go through in chronological order and end up towards like the back end where we've covered everything like over the last sort of 10 years. But you'll just have to grab that thing.
Breaking the studio here, don't mind me, carry on.
Like you said before, your career actually started like way before myself and Dom were even born. And looking back in your history, obviously I'm really familiar with like sort of the Northwest stuff, and when you've like done a little bit here and there. And I remember like the back end of your GP career, but obviously the early part, a lot of the times people kind of go, in today's world, it's either they go up through the BSB route and then jump across, or get over to Spain and go that route. When you were first getting into bike racing, was it a case, did you do some like sort of national stuff and then get into GPs early, or?
I'll need to do this in a nutshell, won't we? Because I think you've got Johnny ready.
No, just take your time. So we've got all day. But
there's a reason we picked you first.
Was the initial introduction into bike racing, was that through your parents? Or something?
It was here actually. Where you're sitting is the road that we used to race up. So
legally,
well, not really, no. But before, there was that much traffic on the road. You don't hear that often now, unless you're talking to somebody my age. But obviously, this area where we live on, we used to. There was a bunch of us used to hang around the shops about a mile and a half from here. So about 30, 35 of us used to hang around. Of course, we were a pain in everybody's backside. So the police would move us along from, you're in our jurisdiction, move off, or now we're move back to that one. We don't want you up here. And all it was a bunch of friendly, like-minded people wanting to ride motorbikes. And of course, up here there's a lovely set of roads just here, and right down to, we used to call it the Humpback Bridge, and kind of where we all learned a wheelie from, using the humpback to start the wheelies. But the race was right down to there, and that was right past the front of my house here. So that's how that's how we got the love of it. And then a couple of guys started road racing, and from that, they said, well, why aren't you racing? You're able to, get down to the start of the humpback first. Why aren't you racing? And I, to be honest with you, Chrissy, I had no money to do it. I had to go and work to make enough money to buy a van and buy a bike. Went production racing. That's how we started. Bought a pair of boots and a pair of leathers from George Higginson. I remember that.
What job were you doing to pay for this at this point?
I worked for Chubb.
What?
Chubb Alarms, a Chubb. So Chubb is a usually they're associated with safes, Chubb safes, and we were with a department in Belfast that was doing CCTV. So I managed that department right up until I left to go. I had to leave to go racing. I remember having this conversation with Joe Miller. I said, well, I want to keep my job. And he said, no, you're going to have to leave. I said, I've got a good job. I'll get that in a minute. So what happened was production race here in Northern Ireland. Production racing turned into, I got a bit of support from QUB on 250 Yamahas, which was 1990, 91 or 1991, 92. They give me the bikes from the mechanical engineering department, which is an unheard of. So university supporting a team, and that through that team, I was able to get to the UK, or mainland UK, and race in Super Cup, as it was called back then, 250 Super Cup. Won one at Brands with all of the names back then, the Bosworths and the Alan Carters and Steve Sawfords and all those the big Mara Brown, all of those names that were the names of the day. So getting over there, I think that kind of opened my eyes. I'd won a couple of Irish championships, which didn't really mean much. It was only circuit racing here. It wasn't roads and circuits. Went over there, and that really opened my eyes. And from there, it very quickly progressed. Within a couple of years, I'd started racing about 1988. So what's that? About 5 years before you were born?
I was 95. I was.
Oh, it was probably even more. I'm not saying you're looking older than you are,
the job's weathered you, son.
So I drive to Northern Ireland. So I just got an opportunity. I just be in the right place, the right time. Joe Miller, from Miller Transport was watching, and we used to come back and do some of the major races here on circuits. And back then, you'd have the Jim Moody's and Ian Simpsons all turning up and racing at Mandela Park, and there was an open race, and at the end of the day, I won the open race or something on it. I think the open race was up to 750 back then, so won on 250, and that kind of got Joe a bit more interested. So I just had a good year. 92 was a good year. I got Trevor Nation's Oxford Products Ducati.
Jesus.
The guys, Alex and those guys in Oxford Products, had said to me, well, you want to ride this? And I was then riding the 250 and the Oxford Ducati. I think that's how I did that finger. So I was in the gooseneck.
I thought you were just being polite.
The gooseneck coming down.
Is that locked like that way?
That's locked that way now, yeah. Well, it's because I've lost a tendon on the top. But I remember, what a great team to ride with, and that again kind of helped me on my way as well. I was riding a big bike and a small bike and going between the two of them.
What age were you at this point?
45.
You look fantastic in there, Jan.
Oh, is it 92? God, what age was I then? I must have been 20, coming into, I was about late 20, like the 28-ish or so, 27,
Right,
28.
so what age were you first, when you first did your local championships?
23. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so...
In today's world, that's mad.
That doesn't work now.
No, I mean, I don't know why it shouldn't. It could work. It's just that things have changed quite a bit, haven't they? Where riders are now coaxed to get onto machinery at a much younger age. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes riders burn out way before they should. I think it's down to how much you want it, and I really wanted it. So the age thing didn't really matter to me. I just wanted it to be better and better and better, and I did have aspirations of going to World Championship. Never thinking I would get there, but you always have to aim much higher than you want. So it was great having Robert Fleck and QB on my side, because they would encourage me to go and race a European race. They'd say, go to Assen, go and get on the boat and go to Assen, or we also ended up in Hockenheim with that 250, and I raced a couple of European Championship races, when Biaggi was leading the European Championship, and that having an opportunity to do that, and I think I finished top 6 at Assen on the 250, and that kind of gave me kind of inspired me to say, well, you might have something here. You might have you should keep at this or have a go at it. And then out of the blue, Joe Miller said to me, end of 92, can you come up and speak to us? I've got a MotoGP, or a GP team back then, it was called GP 500 team. Come up to the house, and of course I was breaking it, going, whoa, what's this about? Turned up at the house around about late November, freezing cold winter's night, and he said to me, do you want to go? You want to come and race for the team at world level on a 500? I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to be able to do that? 250, or an 880 Ducati and jumping onto a 500cc bike. That's probably not going to be the wisest choice I've made, but yes, let's have a go at it, and that's how it went. Back then it was easier. Chris, you'll know this year. We didn't have to bring money. We were getting approached. Good riders were getting approached. All of those riders I raced against back then, the Jim Moody's and the Simmons, we were all making good money at it. Everybody was making good prize money, good sponsorship. And sponsors were covering a lot of it. You could get a little bit, or you could go and you could get. I remember Ian Newton beat me for $5,000 at a $5,000 race at Donington. That's unheard of now. There was a $5,000 race one day at Donington, and then a $5,000 race the next day at Brands Hatch, and he won both of them.
Do you know this is one thing that we were just chatting in the kitchen.
Fuel the second one.
We were just chatting in the kitchen there about doing these podcasts, and like one of the things that stands out from speaking to people from like the kind of era like maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago is exactly what you've just said. I remember we had James Hayden on ages ago. He was talking about the sort of, not going into specifics about money, but just talking about like prize money races like that. Same with Rob Mack and like there's various people, and you just think, one big change is obviously the tobacco sponsorship got taken away.
Yeah.
Aside from that, what do you think the rationale is for why it's structured so differently now?
It's a difficult one to answer that. I think it has to be that that maybe the gate numbers aren't the same, and the organisers can't pay out the same kind of prize money. But I think some prize money would be very beneficial, because it's such as a rider, it definitely is a big encouragement, to go racing. If you think you can cover, I was listening to the Roger Marshall one, and they're talking about that 15 quid that he won off Ron Haslam, and Ron needed it for fuel to get home. and we were doing the same. We were turning up thinking or believing that we were going to win enough money that we could at least cover the weekend, or if not, I had to cover it myself out of my own pocket. So that was certainly
that's another one Roger was saying about. There was one year that he was talking about these meetings that he was winning, and there was like a triple header thing at Oulton Park, and like he was talking about, it's difficult to equate it in today's money, but he was talking about like sort of winning these British Championship races and then building these like building like a mansion and like this and that. And same with Hayden, he was talking about having like this huge house in the south of France with a swimming pool and things. And you just like at the time I think he was doing BSB or whatever, and you think, wow, like it's just
work?
Yeah, and it's it's almost. I mean, the biggest case I would say is World Supersport. You know, not that long ago there was a lot of people doing World Supersport that were obviously all professional riders making a good living, as there should be for racing at that level. Where in today's world, I think I don't really know that many people that do it, but just from like speaking to people on the podcast and stuff, am I right in saying there's like about 1 or 2 people that actually get paid to do World Supersport, and the rest are taking massive money?
Probably 2 to 3 people get paid out of it, and the rest of them are bringing money to it.
How mental is that, considering you know what a high level that you know it is?
It's sort of following the car mentality, isn't it? The F1 kit, even F2, F3, everybody's having to bring money. But you know, we were in that lucky era where we were getting paid to do it, and you know, I was coming back and going to work, so we're jumping on that boat that you came over on, going. Well, we actually took the other one, and then drove all night. So we would jump on the boat and then go all the way down to Brands Hatch from Scotland and try to race on the Friday. You know, try to get there on the Thursday, race on the Friday, or practice on the Friday, race on the Saturday, Sunday, and then get in the van and get back to work on Monday. You know, it was tough going, but to us then it was kind of worth it. You know, we were committed to it, and then it was quite different. You know, taken on by Joe Miller, and then he said, "Well," I said, "So what do we do? How do we go? I've got to give my job up." He says, "Yeah, you got to give your job up. You're going to be traveling the world with us. I cannot just come back on Monday." He said, No, it doesn't work like that. We'll be staying out between races and stuff. You'll be doing flyaways. You'll be going to Malaysia, Japan, and Australia, and you'll do all that in one go. I thought, oh my God, I better tell the wife, you know, that I might not be back for a while.
How long have you been married?
Oh, God knows.
God, should be listening.
30-something years.
Fair play.
Yeah, I remember how it came about, and she'll hate me for saying this, but it is the truth. You know, I was racing in Nuts Corner at the end of, must have been 89, 90, and I said, look, there's 2 championships up for grabs, and if I win both of them, we'll get engaged. And because I'm thinking, I've got to buy a ring, you know, I need the prize money out of this, you know, out of the year, to buy a ring if we're going to. And she said, I'm going to hold you to that. And I'd have won the 2 championships on that day, and we got engaged, and we've been together ever since. So that was.
Were you like leading the race? Went,
yeah, I should have.
I've got a chance here to get out of it like that, like clutch. Sorry, dear, it's not this year.
Funny enough, our brother Colin was my mechanic, and he said to me, "Why you not just flipping cut it across the line, you?" That was her brother. And anyway, so we've been married ever since. So but I mean that whole thing. See, jumping into that when I took that job or took the ride with Joe, I was completely out of my depth, Chris. You know, it's like jumping off a 390 or off a Super Sport 300 bike and jumping onto a super bike. That's kind of that's how it felt to me when I got on the 500. Absolutely no idea how to ride one, no idea about, you know, how to save myself from getting hurt on one. You know, I just overrode it. I no idea how to jet one. You know, coming in and giving feedback to the team and, you know, not knowing what I was talking about. Jeez. And that first year, you know, it nearly broke me. I came back with so many injuries, and I said that, Jill, I said, I can't do this. I'm nowhere in the championship. I didn't finish the first 12 races or something, or 9 races. Maybe I'm exaggerating myself with 12, but it was something like 8 or 9 races. I couldn't I'd smash myself up, seizing the bike with wrong jetting in it, you know, gearbox seizures, all sorts of stuff happened. And, you know, and I'd never ridden for 48 minutes before. You know, we'd never been accustomed to that. Been riding for, you know, maybe 10 laps or something, or 12 laps or 14 laps or something on a British level, maybe a few more at European level, but not having to do 27 laps of Jerez in 40 degrees. And that was an eye-opener. I came back and said, I can't do this. And she said, well, you better get back to it. You've given your job up. You need to get back to work. We have a mortgage to pay. Get back out at it. And I said, look, there's a good chance that I may not come back after a year. She said, well, it's your choice. You've done it. Get on and do it. And I went out and I started training. I really put my head down. And then I think I finished top 10 in the World Championship, or 11th or something in the World Championship. I had like 6 consecutive top 10 finishes in 94. And that kind of gave me, whatever I needed to keep going. And it also kept the sponsors around me. I remember I was racing against John Reynolds, who was unbeatable at home in BSB soil, and Sean Emmett and Dixon and those guys were there, and they'd been, Dixon been there for a while before. And for them to try to even keep their jobs from year to year was really difficult back then, because there was other up-and-coming riders coming through. And it was the same with me. You're fighting for your position. And I remember, you're talking about fingers, I remember I'd really damaged this finger before I took it off. And I damaged it, and I was down at Phillip Island, and Joe Miller said, you're not going to be able to ride with that. The doctor says you shouldn't be riding with that because it's going to sublock. I'd worn the joint away so much that the joint could fall away below it. I said, I'm riding it anyway. He says, well, I've got Sean Emmett here on standby. I'm definitely riding it. I'm definitely riding it. I think, Sean hadn't a ride that year or something, and he had brought him all the way over, said, like, you can ride that bike if he can't ride it. So it's the same thing today. You're trying to protect your seat. And it was even more so back then because we were making a decent living out of it. I remember giving up my job and him saying, Joe Miller saying to me, so how much do you earn a year? I said, well like 14 grand or whatever it was. He said, well, that'll do. Then I'll pay you the same. So that's a grand a race or something I was getting. And that's how it started, and I thought, well, that's good money. And then when I went to GPs, I realised that was really stupid. I should have been asking for about 3 times that. But over the years, and it changed. In some years you make decent money, some years you earn absolutely nothing. And it was really from year to year. And that was the difficulty, was trying to keep that, that ongoing, and trying to do it for 14 years or whatever it was, or 12 years I did it for.
I tell you what, I've been like, there's a good friend of mine, I'm going to drop his name into it. He's going to hate me for doing it, but a friend of mine called Roy Armstrong, and he told me a fact before I met you, and this is before he even went to the Sunflower. He said, one of my favourite riders of all time is Jeremy McWilliams. And I've got to be very careful how I say this, but he said, you were never a naturally gifted rider, but you worked your arse off and you got the way you were by just sheer utter graft. Would you agree with that comment?
Yeah, absolutely. We had no idea what we were doing.
Sorry, Roy, by the way, for grassing you up there.
No, Roy, he's bang on, because, I was crashing all the time, and the only thing that was keeping me going was that some people were saying, well, at least you were fast when you're crashing. At least you were still up there when you crash. You're not crashing when you're 15th. You're either binning it or winning it. And I had no idea how not to crash. We just rode by the seat of our pants, just rode like as hard as you could ride, with as much lean angle as you could ride, with as much corner speed as you could possibly carry. Not understanding that's not really how you're supposed to ride. When I'm coaching riders now, that's absolutely the opposite of that. But anybody who's coming along and asking for coaching, they just think that you ride with as much throttle as you can open in the middle of a corner, which is completely not what we do. We brake as late as possible and balance the bike and carry the corner speed in with no throttle, and then we use as little throttle as possible to get through the corner until we get the bike recovering. But that's not how I rode. I rode with as much throttle as I could get away with without getting high-sided, and then getting caught out time after time with getting high-sided.
Learning the hard way, the painful way.
And no, I had no idea. And then it started to dawn on me that, you couldn't just get away with riding like that on a 500. And, it certainly taught me some manners.
In terms of sort of breakthrough races, I remember seeing you on the podium on the race. I think it was Rossi's first ever race win at Donington, which was a fantastic. That's on YouTube. It's a great race to watch.
2000, so you were 5.
Yeah, was
you remember that far back?
Well, I'm saying I remember watching it.
He's loving it.
We're not watching it live. I think I was a bit too young for that. But going. I presume that wasn't you. Was that your first podium in British, or did you in GPs, or did you? What was your first?
No, because I'd podiumed in 98. I'd still think one of the best races I had when you were 3 was 98. I went to Sachsenring, and I was on a QB 250 Honda. So it was a customer Honda with a kit. You could buy a kit for it. And the kit happened to be pretty good that year because I was beating all the factory Honda riders. And I podiumed it. Harada led on a factory Aprilia, followed by Rossi and Cavarossi, all on Aprilias. And I remember I caught Harada had got ahead of them. He'd gapped them. I'd caught Rossi and Cavarossi, who were fighting. It was the first year anybody was at Sachsenring, so nobody had any advantage, no data. And my fuel breather came off when I'd caught them, and I got plastered after turn 1. You go down the hill, and the fuel breather came off, and the fuel was everywhere. And of course, by the time I got it on again, they'd gone, and I caught them again. And it sounds like I'm making this up. Caught them, and I passed Caparossi one lap at Omega at the bottom of the hill, and the next lap passed Rossi, and then went on to finish second. And Rossi said to me at the end, he says, "Fuck, McWilliams, you lost the front on the fast left up the hill." And you know why you don't remember anything? At the end of a race, you don't remember any of that. You're completely, your mind's blank. You've just raced for 40 minutes. You finished second. You're delighted. You're walking towards the podium, and Rossi's telling me I should have crashed, on the way up the hill. He said the front wheel was smoking, the front tire was smoking, and then I went, "Oh yeah, I did have a bit of a moment down there." So just luckily got second, and that was kind of how I was riding back then. It was just on the edge.
Do you not? Does it not feel a bit surreal talking about them days, like battling with Rossi in different Grand Prix and podiums, and it? I mean, it's such a. If you think of this whole country, how many people from Northern Ireland have been on a podium in MotoGP?
Wow.
Probably.
I'm. Well, I mean, you need to go back in a few years, yeah.
It's a long time, but yeah. Do you not sometimes pinch yourself? I mean, watching what Rossi then went on to do, to think like you've been battling with them and beating them in times.
I mean, I didn't really. To me, it just feels quite normal, that anybody could have done it. I honestly believe anybody that puts their mind to it and in the right place at the right time could go on to do that. I don't see why not. If Jonathan Ray had been given the opportunity to go MotoGP, for sure he'd be on the podium. 100% he'd been winning races. I believe that, and I think everybody knows that. But he just, that opportunity didn't come, and he decided to stick with World Superbike, and we're very, very glad he did. And we'd love to see him going on to win another World Championship. But back then, that was pretty normal to us. Meeting, Max Biaggi was one of the more difficult ones to get on with. He wouldn't been as outgoing or as open as Rossi would have been. Over the years, he became better. Mick Doohan, meeting Mick Doohan for the first time, I remember I ran him off the track in Laguna Seca, and not kind of by accident. It was morning warm up, done our 20 minutes warm up, and I'd just posted like a ninth quickest time at Laguna Seca on this very standard 500 Yamaha of Joe Miller's, and I saw the blue flags. It was near the end of the session. Went over, and Doohan happened to be on my outside, and of course came past and called me all the bastards of the day, as only Mick could do. He had no time for privateers. So I thought, I'm not having this. So I got underneath him. I've shot underneath him again, and put my head down and pushed him wide a bit, and then put my head down and thought, I better get out of the way here. Kept the head down until I got to the corkscrew. Come down the corkscrew, blue flag goes again. So I got into, there's a long right at the bottom of the hill, the corkscrew, and I just shut the throttle so he'd have to go on that side. As soon as he came to that side, I just lifted him and pushed him into the pit lane.
Good lad.
And I carried on. I thought, it's gonna be trouble when I get back in here. I got round, came back in again, and no Mick Doohan and Graham Irvin and Nigel Egan were my mechanics at the time, and they're holding me back, going, "Don't stop," because I was a bit feisty back then, Stop, just leave it. It's race day. All right, we'll leave it. All right, leave it. So anyway, I had a battle with Barris for 10th there. He was on the Suzuki, on the Lucky Strike Suzuki, and kept passing me in the straight. And I think he beat me across the line for 9th, or he was 8th, maybe I was 9th, something like that. Anyway, and I went to Argentina. First time I've been to Argentina. And Saturday morning, I'm 4th quickest. and I'm pretty chuffed myself. It's Saturday morning. Now we've been there on the Friday, and this Saturday morning I'm thinking it's going to be a good weekend. This track was a bit dirty. It was all going my way, you know. Yet
totally sketchy.
Nobody knew anything. It was sketchy. It was narrow. It was typically like Northern Ireland racing, one of the short circuits over here. And next thing, I'm walking across this vast paddock, this big parking space, and Doohan's walking towards me. I'm thinking, okay, here we go. It's gonna kick off now. But he walked straight over me and said, "Hey, fair play, well done. That bike shouldn't be anywhere near there." And that was it. And then we kind of had that mutual respect that carried on for years afterwards. But it took me quite a few years to get there with some of them, with Mick in particular. Rossi was always really outgoing and chatty and fun, and he'd always be up in the motorhome. He goes, fuck, where do you get this motorhome? I need one of these. And he was just an easy going, and he met my kids and what have you, you know, and signed their cap. I remember Zach balling his head off because Rossi had scribbled his name on his hat. And then we went over many years later back to Indy riding those Harley Davidsons, which was an awesome thing to do. And the whole MotoGP paddock was there. And I said to Zach, because I'd been an ex-MotoGP rider, you know, they give us paddock passes. So I went up to see Aaron and Aaron and Mike, and they said, yeah, take some passes. And walking up pit lane, and Rossi and Alex Briggs are there, and he goes, McWilliams, come on. So walk over, and this is Zach, who you met this morning. Rossi says to him, Zach or Jack?
Never. And
he hadn't seen him for about 10 years or more.
Wow.
And Zach was like, wow.
First name terms.
He goes, I'm Zach. How are you? I remember you. And he goes, yeah, I remember you. You were this size. So just you know, lovely memories like that. And for them to see it, because they don't remember anything about Rossi when they were that age.
I tell you what, we've just met Zach. That would have been the first thing I would have introduced myself to. People come to the kitchen. Best friends, Rossi. First name terms. Welcome to the home.
That is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's some nice memories. You only get to think about these things when somebody kind of jogs your memory about it. But, yeah.
But when did your confidence change? Was it the Mick Doohan, like, that moment when you thought, you know what, this is working for me? Or can you pick a particular moment in your MotoGP you thought, I belong here?
I think we spent a couple of years now trying to, you know, harness that 500 to make it as good as we possibly could, and we kind of couldn't, because everything was dated on it. You know, there were ex-Rainy chassis from 1990, and you know, we were getting customer Yamaha engines. Excuse me. That we weren't able to do much with, you know, even with Queen's help, we couldn't really get the Yamaha any more performance out of it. And so we went through the couple of years really in no man's land after that trying to make a 500 privateer bike work, and realizing that being top privateer isn't, you know, it was Mackenzie, you know, Neil, who was the man at the time. He was riding that Slick 50 Yamaha 500. And it was at Laguna Seca where he came over to me and sort of handed the baton to me and said, okay, it's yours now. You know, you're going to have to keep this up. I've been top privateer for long enough. You're going to have to be the man that carries this on. And there was a certain amount of accolade to being top privateer, but you were never going to get a factory ride out of it.
Do you know, like, say, the peak of what you would class as the peak of your riding ability, if you'd had, like, let's say, Rossi's teammate at the time, or whoever was on the best bike, had an injury and you had a chance to fill in, where, in your mind, where do you realistically think you would have, say, if you were on the best bike, which sort of range do you think you would have been in?
I think that might have been answered from an article I did for Fast Bikes in '95. So back then you could wrangle your way into getting a ride on one of the factory bikes by pretending to be a journalist. So Fast Bikes had me down as their journalist, and I did the piece, and I had been writing for Fast Bikes. I'd been doing, you know, race articles and stuff for them at the time. Said, look, we're going to put you in as the rider on Mick Doohan's 500 Honda, and you're going to get a ride on that, and then you're going to get a ride on Yukawa's 250 after that. Well, wow, bloody hell, that's pretty good. I said, and they said, this is the Monday after you've ridden there, so you've raced at Catalunya in Barcelona. You'll know the track, this will be perfect. So I rocked up in the morning and Jerry Birds is taking the briefing to all the journalists, and I walk in and he goes, oh, right. So you're I said, yeah. So he goes.
Are you wearing like a fake beard and a pair of fake glasses like that? It's Clark Kent here. I'm like,
I went like this, but he still recognised me. And he said to me, I'll speak to you in a minute. So he gave them all a brief, and he says, you're going to get an out lap, and you're going to pass once, and you're going to come in, and that's it. And so everybody abide by the rules. You know, Honda are there, the Japanese are there, and he said to me, look, we've got this cleared. You can have 2, and then come back in. So I took 4.
Good lad. I don't blame you.
And the Japanese were out on the start finish, trying to wave me down. Stop.
Was it just unbelievable?
It was just the nicest thing ever to ride. So what got me first was I'm using the same braking markers as I was on my 500 Miller Yamaha, and realising that I could stop the Honda in half the distance, or not half the distance, but 3/4 the distance that it could with the carbon brakes that he was using compared to the really shitty carbon brakes that I was using. Plus it was going quicker. So I was using the same braking marker down the straight thinking, no way. So I was able to go another like 30 metres beyond where I was going, travelling at a higher speed. And by the third lap, I got within 1 second of Doone's best lap of the whole weekend.
And what were you doing on the Yamaha?
About a second below that.
Wow.
Yeah, about a good...
Although why didn't you just pull in and go, I did another 4, give me a job?
Yeah. Although, you know the funny thing was, I come in and Doone's laughing his balls off. He's going, these guys are absolutely livid. And I said, hey, listen, man, it was so nice to ride. But honestly, just another thing about it, you know the long ride after turn 1, 2 through the chicane, you got that lovely long ride at Catalan.
Mm-hmm.
You could just sit in the rear wherever you wanted it. It was just absolutely...
effortless, almost.
Effortless. You could spin it as much as you want or as little as you want. And I remember Barris telling me that. He says, those Hondas, he said, you can just put them wherever you want. It was the nicest bike I'd ever ridden at that point, probably even since. When it came in, they said to me, you're not getting a ride in that 250, piss off.
Blew your chance. And although it would have been nice to know that in your head, to know the difference and to know what could have been, it must have been at the time and even now unbelievably frustrating to know that if fate had worked a little bit different and like you'd had an opportunity that you could have what you might have been able to do.
I think that critically comes down to passports. Being from Northern Ireland, TV and all the rest of it, which really is what sold, the spaces, and that's what got you a ride back then. If you're Spanish, obviously, you're Italian or American, anywhere with large viewing audiences that they could sell the TV rights to, that would be...
Is that why you started going the Tash to pretend to be Italian? It's nice.
Yeah, it never worked.
He's so from Kazakhstan, right?
Never worked. But I mean, even trying to get, like the first ride, I remember in 2005, the first time I met KTM, this is how this relationship started. They gave me a... Gigi Delaney was our crew boss in Aprilia. He was overall, he was management, and I had to go to him and say, Gigi, KTM, this is the end of the year at the last test, and even though Aprilia weren't competing the year after in 2005, we still had to do all of these scheduled tests, even at the end of November. So we went to the test, and we knew where we would get the Aprilia. We get it within 1.5 seconds of the front, and that was it. Or 1 second from the front. That was good. And then that's as good as it went with that cube. And I said to Gigi, would you let me go and ride that KTM? They've asked me to test it. And he said, what? He said, you're contracted to Aprilia until December. You're not riding that KTM. I said, well, you offered me a 2-year contract, and I decided to take 1 year. And now I haven't got a ride next year because Aprilia are stopping. I could have taken the 2-year, and you'd have had to pay me for the second year.
Right, aye.
Like Siggy did. And I stupidly said, this thing's not competitive. I'm just going to take a 1 year. So I've now got the opportunity to ride that KTM that they've just brought along, the first MotoGP bike with a Roberts chassis. Can I ride it? McWilliams, you're always so much trouble. I said, Gigi, come on. He said, you can have 1 hour on it and then come back on the third day, but you've got to finish the test. Now that's unheard of. You're contracted to somebody, you're never going to get out of that contract. Anyway, I pleaded with him and made my case. And Wolfgang was there, Wolfgang Febrer, I mentioned earlier, and the engine designer, Kurt Trieb, and they said to me, if you can ride this and you can get it within a certain time, we have a contract for you.
What was going through your head at this point? Don't crash.
I'm thinking,
wide it open.
How much is that contract going to be? How close have we got to get out of the front? All of these things are like, you got to put all that out of your head, Dom. This was like,
that's incredible.
Right, where's the sticky tires? What's the fastest lap time of the day? Capirossi had it with a 140 flat, I think it was, which is pretty quick back then. 2004, into the the 140 flat, and I got within 0.9 of his lap time. First time out in the KTM. Call it a 141, I think it was. And I came back in after the hour, put sticky tires on it, now qualifying tires, came back in. The boys in KTM went, cheers, thank you. I think we've just got that across the line. I think the board will go with it. Your contract will be in the post. And it was. Anyway, long story short, back to the TV thing. BBC didn't want a Northern Irish man on the bike. They wanted an Englishman on the bike. So Shiggy got the ride, and I disappeared. But to be fair,
Jesus.
All my work from then on, working with Dorna and all of the work that I've got through KTM has amounted to much more than that one year would have.
Mm-hmm. It just goes to show the sort of politics, like, behind things.
There's politics back then. There's politics now, and that's just the way it was. And you've got to accept it, because you can't say, well, I'm going to take you to court and do this and do that.
That's just the way the world.
It's a waste of time.
Just the way the world sort of turns.
When I briefly discussed the fact of you felt like an untalented rider that you had to work hard at it. It's incredible, that mindset, that you just immediately went, oh shit, what happens if I fuck this up? Wasn't that? It was just your confidence. Explain to me your confidence. Was it you just looked at it and went, this is happening. I can't do that lap time.
I remember I'd been there. I'd been in GPs now. I'd gone through all those bad years in 500s, jumped on the 250, and then made the 250 competitive. Finished 6th or something in the World Championship on 250. Won a 250 GP. Finished in the podium many times on 250. Then got the opportunity to ride the Factory Aprilia in 2000, which was the one with when Rossi won his first race. And I should, my fault. I kind of feel even now I should have won that race, but I'm not in any way bitter about it. Just one of those things. I went too early. I should have just, you're asking about how you learn and how you progress and how your race development brain comes along over the years, and that's one looking back on it. Going too quickly at the beginning and gapping them, and using the tire up, and then Rossi and Kenny were able to come back at the end of the race and get me across in the last 2 laps. But that was an awesome, in all of the memories, that 2000 race at Donington was one of the best ever, because I remember not even being able to get back round to the start finish, track invasion, and having to ride up the grass and stuff, and the big pats in the back, the ones that nearly flipping bust your lungs, and all the high fives the whole way around. I mean, that was just. I
think McGuinness was in that race. McGuinness was 10th in that race.
Yeah, he was well up in that race too. Yeah, and I suppose so. I'd been through all of that. I'd now had a factory ride in 2000 with Aprilia, so the confidence was starting to build.
Yeah.
2001, I went back to 250, and then won a race in Assen, and podiumed quite a few times. I can't remember how many, but finished pretty well up in the championship. Then Kenny Roberts 2002, 2003, again pole positions and stuff on that, and
just going up and up and up.
So
and up.
you're kind of believing that whatever you're going to jump on now. At that stage, I kind of learned how to ride a bike. In all the early years in 93, 94, 95, and 96, probably still taking a long time to learn how to do it. By the end of the 2000s, I was pretty confident then.
So I'm going to ask that dreaded question again. How old were you when that KTM option came around?
Yeah, I got to be the oldest. I was the oldest rider on the grid, so that was 2005. I was born in 64. 41.
You know what I mean? That. Age is just a number, isn't it? And that is just the absolute epitome of it. It's just right, you know what, son? Where's my helmet? Get the sticky tires. You're having it. That's fun. I love it, mate.
I think the riders, I've seen some of the best rides of anybody's career coming out in their mid 30s to late 30s. I think that look at Rossi's years too. Those 30, when he's in his 30s, mid 30s, he was awesome. Still was right until I mean, what age is he now? He's got to be 43, is he, or something?
Something like that, yeah.
You know, and, you know, still at that last race at the end of last year, you know, it shows that he still has what it takes. You know, yes, maybe, you know, he could have and should have and maybe would have retired earlier, but why retire when he's enjoying it? And I think that's kind of how I was feeling about it too.
Were your sons ever interested in starting racing?
No, they've done a couple of track days and stuff with me, and ridden trials bikes and all of that. But I think they just got such a sickener of being all around the world, seeing bikes, talking bikes, non-stop. You know, there's only so much you can take. And funny, I've kind of happy when they get into football. You know, both good footballers.
Oh, very good.
Are they getting some cheddar out of it?
No, they never got that far. But they did, and then Jack got an injury and what have you.
Right.
Yeah, but Zach was a decent player as well. You know, and played for one of the local teams here. Both of them. That was my, you know, their childhood was me taking them to the football when I was home from racing. It was like I couldn't wait to take them to the football. Great.
It's nice to sort of spread things out. I tell you what, do you want to grab the scales?
Oh yes, the game time.
Just while Dom grabs that, I remember you racing in that Harley Cup thing. It was a little bit at BSB, and I think you did go around there was like a few good GPs.
Well, we did that one only in America, but I did a couple in Barber as well, but it wasn't a GP. It was just AMA.
I remember. Did you not do something at Knockhill? I remember. Was that not Harley Davidson?
Yeah. But that was all part of BSB Championship. I won the. So I'm a British champion on a Harley.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, 'cause, Danny Webb's brother was like one of your main competitors, wasn't he? Was it Jamie Webb?
And Mike Edwards. Yeah. I tell you what, they were so much fun to ride, those things. I mean, you just didn't want to get them wrong. They're 250 odd kilograms. You know, you didn't want to get them wrong, but
heavy lumps.
They were lapping within about 8 seconds of some of the superbike time. I remember.
Can you remember that? It was a one-make series of BSB, but on big Harleys.
I can never remember watching it. But cool. I'll do out like that. Have you ever, if the money was right, would you ever come do the try options? You got Stoker, Walker, McGuinness in there. Imagine you turning up.
It's not even to do with the money anymore. No. It's just a bit of crack, isn't it? I was watching that race that Stoker and McGuinness were.
That was mid.
Hammering each other.
Do you not fancy a bit of that?
I tell you, absolutely.
I tell you what, when we first started this pod, we got in a lovely little pattern of getting everyone else a job but me and him. So every time we got a guest on, we're like, "Oh, I'd love to have a crack at that." I really hope we get. I really hope someone like Steve Plater began. We're going to make this happen, right? Get him on the phone. So hopefully, when this comes out, you'll be riding a Ducati.
And I mentioned earlier about the Patreon thing. We'll have some Patreon questions as well for you. Dom, do you want to just explain that? The game.
So it's a grip strength game, and we've got like a Top Gear style leaderboard on it. So the idea is you've got to hold the weight scales straight out, and then just grip and go and just squeeze as hard as you can. 2 attempts at it.
Your right hand won't be much good at.
Well, this will be the interesting thing because you've got the same.
My left hand.
So what we've Peter Hickman's leading it, followed by Brad. Now Brad Howell is like a beast of a bloke, and Hickman, top rider with serious leverage with his fingers. So
13.5 is the highest, and decent scores. Like if you can
straight out, my man, straight out and go for it.
I'll move them.
So you got to get your hands on here,
just in the middle. Yeah.
So Chrissy gives you a better demonstration of it. So it's like you've just got to get the palm.
It. And then just squeeze as hard as you can. Basically.
2 attempts, my man. 2 attempts.
My hands don't even reach the back of it.
No.
I know. I'm a similar side of things.
All right. So if you go straight, if you put it straight, if you face it this way.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Then he can tell us the score, can't he?
I can reach it. I can reach it that way.
Oh, really?
Here we go.
Then. Ready? Go on.
Jesus.
That's good. Go on.
Go on, one more go again.
So as you practice, that was about 11, I think.
11. I've got slippy hands now.
This is where the competitive nature comes out.
And it's like, I'm just here for the crack.
I'll tell you what, Zach looks a big lad. I bet he would be good at this.
He was squeezing this, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Right, you ready? Go on, squeeze.
Oh, I can't do it now. Oh, you bugger.
Yeah.
It's hard to grab that. Could you not just make something a bit wider here so you could reach it?
Yeah, I'll have to.
Look, I love this. The KTM development rider's already trying to tamper the game.
I can't squeeze it there. I can't reach it.
Should we leave it with an 11?
We've got 11. We're going to come. Go on, son. Go on. There you are. We're going to say 11. 11 is that. There you go. Good man.
Patreon questions. I'll switch your mic back here. So there we go. So first one from Tony Rolls. What's the best and worst bike you have ever tested or raced?
Well, we've got the best, didn't we, with a Honda?
But I've ridden so many bikes. I'd need to go through my diary of what I've ridden, because I've ridden Buells and I've ridden Harleys. I've ridden kind of everything. I rode.
Let's go worse. You can always remember your worse.
I mean, the most difficult bike I've ever had to ride was the Aprilia Cube, and the reason being, because it sounded awesome, it looked awesome, and it was in MotoGP. But the problem with it was it was derived from 3 cylinders, so basically Formula One three cylinders of a Formula One engine.
Yeah.
And when you get to about 12,000, it makes it has a hole in the torque, and then the torque arrives back in again at about 13,000, but it arrives in at twice as much as where it peaked off.
Aye.
So when it comes in, it was uncontrollable. Basically,
If you're on the edge of the tire.
when you get to the exit of a corner and you're just coming towards the curbs, you think you have this, and then you get a delivery of torque which is twice as much as you had a minute ago.
Jesus.
It just kept on flipping me onto my low side, and it broke my ribs every weekend. Where you had it, you were in control of it, but then the bike basically delivered this power, and it just beat me to an absolute pulp. And that was the hardest thing, trying to get back on the bike every week with broken ribs and do it all again. And every time I fell off again, it just broke the same ribs. So I must have had, like, for that whole year, probably fractured ribs all over my body. And then I remember for a couple of years after that, any time I fell, I broke the same rib again, one of them. So that was the hardest one. And then I got an opportunity to ride for a company called Oral Engineering in Italy, and it was development of exactly the same type engine, 3 cylinders, derived from a BMW Formula One engine, and they wanted to get the MotoGP, and the delivery was even worse. There was no inertia in the engine, and it just spun the wheel everywhere. I remember having a whole garage full of these guys on laptops watching just on the laptop, and they were in real time to the bike. The bike was actually sending its signals, so their data collection was way above anything I'd ever seen, because they were Formula One. They'd come from Formula One, but the bike was even worse than the Aprilia Cube. So I have to say that was probably the worst bike I ever rode. And I remember taking them all out of the garage one day. I said, "Look, guys, got 22 technicians sitting in here looking at a laptop. I need you to come out on the track and see what the bike's doing." And when they come out, and we're at Almeria, Almeria. Christian, I know I'd been there on the little 3-cylinder KR, the 500, and got round there in a 1:35, which is a real quick lap time. I couldn't get within 4 seconds on this thing, and it was leaving. You'd swore there'd just been a Spanish championship at it. There was rubber everywhere, and it was all the wrong shape. All of the spin marks were all completely, they weren't nice, smooth.
135 is incredible. 135 is faster than all the BSB lads do in superbikes, so that's like incredibly fast. That.
Yeah, I was on a 160 horsepower KR3.
Wow.
Because that's all. But remember, they only weighed about 120 kilograms. 125 kilograms.
Yeah, that I think
you still can't downplay it. That's seriously
fast. best BSB times that I've ever known around there is like 36 or 37. So yeah, that is unbelievable. The only person I know as fast as Tito, but he lives there pretty much. Yeah. Good question here from Adam Watt. Do you think we will see BSB at Bishop Court within the next 5 years?
Wow, that's a good question. I would love to say yes, and I hope they will, because the track's awesome.
Is that near here?
Yeah. It's about an hour drive from here. Yeah, but it is awesome. It's so well kept that the condition of the asphalt and everything is, is good and better than a lot of the BSB tracks. And it's a nice wide open track. It doesn't have many garages. Has a couple, but they could easily put up something temporary there, and it's a huge paddock, and
it would be a mint.
This sounds like a good question. Ian Higginson heard a rumour that at the Sunflower meeting, I think it was 93 at Kirkstown, when Jeremy was on the Miller GP bike, that the TV producers asked him to slow down to make it more exciting, as it was being broadcast live on BBC Northern Ireland, and he just kept pissing off into the distance. Is that an urban myth?
That's probably an urban myth. I remember having a good battle with Hizzy there. Hizzy was on it. I mean, Hizzy was a hard bastard to beat. You couldn't. I'd say out of all the natural riders I've ever watched, Hizzy was, one of the best. And I remember Hizzy, and I didn't get it easy around there. I remember actually the suspension linkage broke, and we hadn't even looked at the bike after the end of the year. We just pulled it out and got it home, and then pulled it out, went to Kirkuson thinking it would be easy, and it wasn't that easy actually on a 500 round there. But yeah, I remember having some fun and wheeling, and for the cameras, and just nice to get home in front of the home crowd and just have a bit of fun. But no, there was I told to slow down?
Not that you recall.
No, I think make sure you guys make a race of this, because it's going to be televised. Don't be pissing off. I don't think I could piss off.
Another good question. This sounds like a good fan of yours. So Craig Arnold, I'll never forget that your win at Assen 2001. It was amazing for us fans. How did the victory feel? And who were your toughest rivals in 250 GP? Are you planning any racing this year? So was that 2001 victory in the 250?
I remember getting told off by the team afterwards for wheeling on the last lap. So I had a 15 or 16 second lead, and you're thinking, well, I can chance a wheelie or two here, get the crowd on their feet, because there's always a good home crowd at Assen. There's always a brilliant home crowd at Assen. So I'm wheeling around and having a bit of fun, and I got back in, and Dieter Stappert, who was Aprilia Germany's, it was his team. He went through me for a shortcut, for showboating on the way back round again, but. Back then, remember the rivals. I think the best rider I ever came against, had a ride against in 250, and when we moved up, was Tajiro Kato, and he was there. And had he had the right tire choice, I'm sure it would. I love wet conditions or drying conditions, or as the line starts to the narrow line starts to get, you got to be so accurate. I'm sure he would have given me a good run for my money. But remember then it was also Melandri, and some of the best names ever in the 250 era. Yukawa was probably still in it. Alzamora was in that race, but Tajiro Kato would have been the hardest guy ever. He just came. Remember when the start? I'm digressing, but went to Japan, and this little kid came over and shook my hand. And he's wearing a Honda jacket, and you couldn't see his hands. They're giving him a large, and he was about the size of, he was even smaller than Lee Johnson, and that's what I'm talking about. And he shook my hand, and I said, "Hi, how are you?" He goes, "I'm Tajiro. I'm watching you. You're a big fan." And next day we all turned up, and he blew us all away as a wild card. And then then a number of years, 2 years later, he came and won the World Championship.
Wow. I've not been over to the Netherlands for a good few years now, but just on the news recently, it looks like it's a bit crazy over there at the moment with riots and stuff. Especially, have you seen the riots in Amsterdam recently?
Yeah, I've seen. I'm trying to ignore it. I'm trying to ignore all that bad stuff that's going on.
Yeah, don't bring the negative vibes.
Burying my head in the sand over here. Yeah, because Zach was asking me about going away for a city break, and I said, "What about Amsterdam?" And I thought,
not at the moment.
Maybe not Amsterdam.
Yeah, it looks a bit.
Yeah, but the second part of that question about any plans to race, probably the Northwest.
Yeah, that's a definite Northwest. So yeah, next question.
could be.
Yeah.
Farquhar's bikes?
Could be a pattern. Could be. It depends. Yeah.
Stop being a tease, for God's sake, man. We've been here long enough now.
Honestly,
just give us an excuse.
Honestly, I don't know. But I tell you what, I'd like to be there again. Because it's been 2 years since we've been out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do my best to come over and watch this year, because that and the TT
that'll be him.
I'm not saying nothing.
Put the plate in the back of the van.
I know his mother. I'm not saying that.
Do you know what? After such the gap of no road racing, I think the atmosphere and everything, I think everyone will just be so pleased for it to be back on. It'll be a hell of an occasion.
Plus, best pint of Guinness you'll ever drink too up there.
Amen. Anchor bar.
Right. Dave Baum, a good friend of mine, how did his role in Under the Skin come about with Scarlett Johansson, and how high on the list of wins does he rank the Northwest 200 win at? Hope I've got this right. 50 years of age. Also, just like to say, Chrissy and Dom, you are doing a mega job with these pods at the moment. Gold after gold, lads. So thanks very much.
That's very nice of them. Yeah, I think I was 55 when I won the last Northwest.
Very good. Is that a rep?
2019. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'd like to think I'm going to keep it for a while, but
good lad.
You never know, do you?
Well, I'd do it.
Just keep doing it another 25 years. But yeah, I think that was that in answer to the Northwest question we answered earlier. Yeah, there's nothing like standing on that podium up there, and particularly being slightly older than the other riders, I think that makes it even more special.
What age are you now, sorry?
I'm 57 now.
That's mad. You don't look 57 at all, like.
So I was definitely 55 then when I won it on the Saturday. I fell off on the Thursday, and I should have won it on the Thursday, I feel, but I fell off on that matters again.
Do you know when you were like sort of 25-ish, when you think about like back then your idea of a 57-year-old, you would think, I bet you don't feel like that now, and you don't look at.
My kids still think, what are you doing at 57? Are you mad? What are you doing? What are you doing riding a bike? What are you doing racing? And then of course they turn up and you win it, and then they're going,
attaboy.
Do you ever bump into people you used to go to school with or a similar sort of age and think, God, you're an old man?
But no names in case they're listening. Yeah. But I
bet you do. Right.
Well, remember we used to go to the Northwest whenever I was like 16, 17. Used to ride our motorbikes up to it and camp overnight across the road from the paddock. And watching it back then and never thinking I was ever going to make it as a rider. Never mind ride at the Northwest 200. So I think it's more of a special feeling because it was very close to our hearts when we were very young. We came up watching it and staying up there and staying up all night. There's so much going on. You've seen all sorts. Like it was something else. But the Under the Skin. What do you say about that? I had this conversation the other day with a mate of mine, and he said, what's that awful movie you were in? And I said, yeah, it's still ranking as Guardian's all-time fifth best movie of all time. He goes, yeah, right, piss off. He says it's so weird, and it is so weird. And it was so much fun taking part with Scarlett Johansson. She's a really lovely person, really down to earth,
and not hard to look at.
It depends on what. Depends on
the like.
She's portrayed as something completely different in this movie. She's not the Scarlett Johansson that you might know.
I'm from the northeast, son.
So yeah, it always still looks that good. Be careful, Lauren. Sitting here.
Well, I know there's a distance here, so she can't throw anything that hard from there. Hopefully not.
But yeah, that was quite surreal, actually. How it all came about was, and honestly, I don't think you get time to listen to how it all came about. But I'll try to sum it up. Got a phone call from somebody I don't even know. Said I'm scouting for somebody to take part in a movie, and you think, yeah, it's a bit of a wind up, isn't it? And next thing, she came back on again and said, look, honestly, we've looked at your profile. You'd fit the part very well. It's a Jonathan Glazer movie. Scarlett Johansson's the lead in it, and they want you to be the bad guy. And I said, yeah, come on, piss off. You stop taking the piss. Anyway, she didn't go away. She said, I'll get Jonathan Glazer to phone you. I'll get him to Skype you. And right enough, Jonathan Glazer Skypes me, and I know Jonathan Glazer had looked, at his Wikipedia page and all the rest of it, and he says, "Hi Jeremy, I want you to do take this part in the movie." And I said, "Look, I still think it's a wee bit of a, I kind of didn't believe. Why are you looking for me?" And he said, "Well, I said, you've got a look that we kind of need in the movie." So don't mince your words then. John, what is it you're looking for? He says, well, somebody who looks more like a bit of a bad guy than a good guy. Well weathered, can ride a motorbike in the Highlands of Scotland. I said, yeah, you're not doing much to make me feel any better about this. And he said, look, I'll tell you what to do. Put a pair of leathers on and walk up and down the living room that you were in earlier. You walk up and down there. And I said, this is a wind up, isn't it? And he goes, no, look, I'll get off the Skype, get your missus to video it on the phone and then send me it. So of course I get my leathers on. I'm walking up and down, and Jill's laughing her legs off. She's going, what are you doing? I said, he just wants to see me in a pair of black leathers. And at that moment, my best mate walks through the back door, and I go, this is a friggin' wind up, isn't it? So at that point, I thought it was a pure wind up. And Big Pete says, what are you doing? And told him the story, and it got the part, went over and spent about 40 days and back and forward in Scotland, in the Highlands of Scotland, riding motorbikes at a stupid rate of knots through the worst, the most treacherous conditions. He really wanted it to be, to look authentic. remember up and down the motorway, and I can probably say this now because it's well after the event, and having to ride up the motorway with a camera bike behind me, and the guy who the tasked to do the job couldn't keep up. He just never used to that kind of speed. And I had to bring one of my mates over from in Scotland and get him to do the camera bike and stay with me up through the traffic at 3:00 in the morning. Wow. And he ended up doing all of the camera stuff, all of the close camera stuff. The stunt riders are really good at what they do, but they just don't do speed, like real high speed stuff. Mm-hmm. So a bit of fun, yeah, but it was a bit of fun.
Was it an acting role, or was it?
It was just being around Scarlett, being like shadowing Scarlett, and just making sure that she was an alien. Look, I don't want to get into it. It's quite a weird.
No spoilers.
It's quite a weird and complicated movie, and actually anybody that says they understood it are definitely lying. But when I checked up on that Guardian list, it's actually the 4th best of all time. So it's moved up a notch from where it was. So I don't know. I mean, it's for those.
I'll have to check that out.
Those kind of film buff type people.
I hope it's on Netflix. I can't wait.
At least we've got our nighttime entertainment. So
that's exactly it.
Don't be holding that thing up for. Don't waste your time.
Well, do you know, for people listening or watching, whether on YouTube or listening. If they want to sort of keep in touch with you, what you're up to and stuff, do you use social media pages or
just Twitter? Only because it kind of gives me all the information I need about motorbikes or whatever I'm having to watch at the time. Politics, I keep getting told just to comment on bike stuff and forget about politics. But I feel that it's an open platform and you can say whatever you want, and what some of what our governments are doing are really messed up. And I think if you can't comment on it or at least give your opinion on it, then what can you do? It's an open platform, but
it's the people's choice to follow.
Yeah, you can always unfollow,
exactly. Yeah.
But I have to say, I don't get too deep in it. And actually, I've stopped getting so involved in it because you get a lot of bad feedback. Not that I care. I really couldn't care less how much bad feedback I get on any social media platforms. I'm beyond that. I don't need really any followers. It doesn't do me any good, and I don't get paid per hit, or you don't get adverts jumping up in my timeline or whatever it might be. So it's different for what you guys are doing, but I'm not.
Oh no, I'm like you. It's him that gets the followers.
Yeah, but it's fun. I think something like this, the podcasts are good because I actually, when you sent me the link, I started listening to it and I thought, it's like 2 hours there of that. How am I going to get through that? And right enough, if you go out in the garden, stick your pods in and you're doing a bit of work, you get through it in no time. And it's actually a good crack. It's good to listen to.
The thing is, it's good for, the sort of dead time in your days? So where you would usually be listening to the radio or whatever, like say if you're walking the dog, if you've got a job where you like, if you've got a driving job or if you're up and down the motorway, it can kill so much time.
See, me going through airports, I'm always looking for stuff to go through airports. Now you've given me something else to look at.
Well, you've got plenty of episodes to catch up on.
140. Well, just tell me what the good ones were, will you?
Yeah, I'll send you a short list. But no, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today to join us. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone listening will. And have you got anything else to wrap up with?
No, looking forward to seeing on the Northwest grid.
Yeah,
that's what I'm
there.
I'm sure definitely. Definitely.
Good, man. I mean, I think that's what we're all looking forward to, getting back to a bit of normality, back to a bit of road racing, a bit of fun, and catching up with everybody that we haven't seen for a number of years now. I'm looking more forward to that.
Just quickly before we go, do you think the Ulster Grand Prix is coming back?
Well, it looks like it now, yeah. Which is great news. It's not a race that I've raced, and everybody's told me how good it is. Glenn Irwin actually rode it, and he said, "Look, you've got to ride it. It's an awesome track. Have you ridden it?"
Yeah, I've done it.
You said the Tandragee. Have you ridden the Ulster as well?
Yeah. So they normally have the 150 race before the Ulster, so I've done the both. It's outstanding.
It looks like an awesome track, and we've cycled around it a few times, but not ridden it. So
now, not to get in trouble with your wife, but I think arguably it's safer than the Northwest.
Really, yeah. Well, people say that about the curbs, but I actually like the curbs.
Wait, no, it's definitely a solid boundary, isn't it? That's the track limit.
It's a limit to me. It's a little bit like riding a track to me because I can put my wheels in it.
You actually use it, especially coming out of the chicanes. It does help. Yeah. But like the Ulster, Oh God! I hope your wife's turned off at this point. You've got to go
really
for it.
put your wheels in the grass verge unless you're Philip McCallan. Of course, he was always pretty.
Yeah, he was tasty at that. He was tasty at that. But there we go. But hopefully we can persuade you one day to do it. But like Chrissy says, honestly, thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely great.
I don't know who's going to sit and listen to all that nonsense, but
there's plenty. Don't worry. But massive thank you to our sponsors, Colchester Kawasaki, and all of our patrons. And we'll continue the tour. We've got quite a few. We're over here for 2 days, so we've got quite a few people lined up, and look forward to. It'll probably take us to like the middle of February or something like that. So the next few episodes are with a slightly different accent to what you usually used to.
Yeah, you're the poshest one that we've got. So
really? Okay. I hope you can understand mine. If you can understand mine, and Johnny's, you'll be all right. But the rest of them, I'm not sure.
Right, got you. Understandable.
Well, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
We'll take care. Catch you soon. See you. Bye.
Click, buy, deliver. With remote purchasing from the 2-time Motorcycle News Dealer of the Year, Colchester Kawasaki. Proud sponsors of Chasing the Racing.